the suttas that represent ideas closest to the teachings of the founder can be supposed to be contained mainly in the first 4 collections of the Sutta Pitaka. Although we make this statement, one cannot rule out the possibility of these collections also containing later ideas. Now, this shows that we have to think of some general criteria, some general standards to determine what the earlier sources are. The problem is that there are no strictly applicable criteria to determine. Various scholars have proposed different criteria. Like, for instance, if you take studies in early Buddhism, what is this? Okay. Not now. Yeah. G.C. Pandey, P-A-N-D-E, studies in the origins of Buddhism. He has tried to identify the distinction between early and late sources. That is a very early attempt to do this. Then there are other scholars like the Cambridge scholar K.R. Norman, who have attempted to do this. Then some Indian scholars like Max Muller and others. No, not Max Muller. Who is Bimal Chandra. He has also tried to identify the early sources. However, there is no universal agreement regarding which is early and which is late. Some useful criteria for identification of the early sources are criteria like linguistic and stylistic features of the scriptures. Now, in what can be considered as the earliest, you find very ancient language which is closer to the Vedic language style. Early Pali, archaic, we call it archaic Pali, A-R-C-H-A-I-C, archaic Pali. And as I said, the Attaka and the Parayana Vaggas of the Sutta Nipata are very good examples for that. Very ancient Pali, closer to the use of Vedic forms, are found in those 2 sections of the canon. Then another factor that can be considered is the seeming closeness to the development of ideas in the history of Indian thought. Development of ideas in the history of Indian thought. Now, to give one example, if you take the suttas of the Digha Nikaya as an example, most of the suttas deal not with controversies within Buddhism, different viewpoints within Buddhism, but they deal with the Buddha's critique of the pre-Buddhist viewpoints, the Brahmanical systems. Most of the suttas are intent on the Buddha's attitude towards pre-Buddhist teachings, pre-Buddhist theories. The very first sutta of the Digha Nikaya, Brahmajala Sutta, deals with the 62 views. Now, definitely you can conclude that this must represent early period. Yeah. 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 62 different views. Then most of the suttas are critical of Brahmanical viewpoints about sacrifice. The Buddha's critique of the Brahmanical sacrificial system, like the Kutadanta Sutta, for instance, in the Digha Nikaya, Tevijja Sutta in the Digha Nikaya, then even Samanya Phala Sutta, which looks at the pre-Buddhist teachers, the 6 teachers who existed at the time. So these can be considered as representing early Buddhist ideas. Then, as I said, the language. Later sources use very poetic language, decorated with a lot of similes and metaphors, then very descriptive of the environmental features, such things. Beautiful language, influenced by later classical Sanskrit. If you take the Apadana, this is very observable. There is a striking, this can be seen as a striking characteristic of a text like Apadana. So the language is a useful criterion. The language of the early sources is very simple and closer to the Vedic style. It does not go into exquisite descriptions, detailed descriptions of a mythological nature. Mythology is much less in the earlier sources, although there is a mythological content. A scattered kind of mythological content is there, but it's not, it doesn't play a major role in the earlier sources. Yeah, Jataka probably represents a late development. There are a few Jatakas mentioned briefly in the first 4 collections, like the Mahasudassana Sutta, probably Mahagovinda Sutta, which developed later into Jataka stories in the Jataka book. So, Jataka also can be considered as belonging to a later stratum, which gradually developed, adding on material from time to time. So, suttas which focus attention on the historical background of Indian thought, like the ones in the first section of the Digha Nikaya, are they probably belong to an early period. So the early suttas have the characteristic of a simple naturalist doctrinal approach. They take a simple naturalist doctrinal approach, which is a distinctive characteristic of the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha's teaching has this distinctive characteristic as opposed to the later doctrines that were influenced by classical Sanskrit tradition. Regarding the development of the Buddha concept, a comparison of the scriptural material in the first 4 collections of the Sutta Pitaka with that in the texts belonging to the 5th collection shows that the latter depicts a transitional stage in the development of the Buddha concept. That is, the some of the texts of the 5th collection represent a transitional stage in the development of the Buddha concept. The basis for this observation is that such doctrines as the fulfillment of perfections, paramita, by the Bodhisattva over countless previous lifetimes are comparatively rare in the former body of literature. Now, even the term Bodhisattva, when used in the first 4 collections, refers to the past of the Buddha's life in that particular birth, when he was born as Buddha. Before he was enlightened, he calls himself Bodhisattva. Pubbeva Sambodha. Pubbeva Sambodha means before my awakening. Before my awakening. Anabhi Sambuddhassa, when I was not fully awakened. Bodhisattaseva Sato, when I was a Bodhisattva. Yeah, the unenlightened person who was seeking for enlightenment is the Bodhisattva in that life. The life in which he became the Buddha. But there is no reference to this ancient past. Ancient past in the first 4 Nikayas. And another point that is striking is that paramita does not occur. The concept of paramita in the first 4 collections. The only reference that I have come across is in the Majjhima Nikaya to the term parami, use of the term parami in the Sangharava Sutta. Sangharava Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya. I write it here. It uses the term paramipatta, but it's a reference to not only the Buddhist tradition, but commonly to all teachers who claimed to have understood something important regarding a higher life. Well, the full Pali expression, it might be difficult for you to remember. It says, Ditta Dhamma Abhinya Vosana Paramipatta. Ditta Dhamma Abhinya Vosana Paramipatta. So this Brahmin named Sangharava comes to the Buddha and tells him, there are many teachers who make the claim that in this life itself they have come to the perfection of higher knowledge. They have come to attain the perfection of higher knowledge. In that context, the term parami has been used in the Pali, the first four Nikayas. But I find no other place in which this term has been used in this technical sense of perfections of a Buddha in past lives. It was used as used to mean perfection of the religious life. Perfection of the religious life, commonly, as something that is attainable in this life. One can attain the perfection in the religious life in this very birth. And there were many teachers who claimed that they had attained such perfection. But now, the idea is pushed further to say, Ditta Dhamma Abhinya Vosana Paramipatta. This was the early usage. Ditta Dhamma, long term. Abhinya Vosana Parami Patta. If you take the words separately, Ditta Dhamma means in this life itself, in this immediate life. Abhinya means higher knowledge. Vosana means coming to an end. Vosana, reaching an end. Paramippatta, attain perfection. So, coming to an end in the attainment of perfection in this life itself. There were so many teachers who claimed that. And this Brahmin Sangarava asked the Buddha, out of them, where do you belong? Asked the Buddha, where do you belong out of these? Then the Buddha classifies all the existing teachers and says, some made this claim based on their the Vedic tradition, following the Vedic tradition, Anusutika, based on revelation, revealed teachings of the Vedic tradition, the authoritative tradition of the Vedas. Then others, the second group, the Buddha says, belong to those who depended on pure reasoning, Takki Vimansi, those who depended on Takka and Vimansa, logical inquiry. And the Buddha says, I belong to those who experience directly. Bubbe ananusutesu dhammesu samangyeva abhinyaya. Bubbe ananusutesu dhammesu samangyeva abhinyaya. Samangyeva abhinyaya means having understood in a higher way by oneself of things that have not come in the revealed tradition. Bubbe ananusuta means not coming before, earlier in the revealed traditions. So that was the Buddha's position regarding that. So the term parami is used in that context, but it doesn't have the technical sense which these later texts of the Khuddaka Nikaya have introduced. And similarly, Bodhisattva also restricted to the life of the Buddha in his lifetime as the Buddha, prior to the attainment of enlightenment. Then, in the earlier texts, a far more realistic concept of the nature of the knowledge of the Buddha is presented. Whereas in the later texts, omniscience is attributed to the Buddha. So this concept of omniscience also plays a very important part in the Buddhist tradition. The question whether in the early period the Buddha claimed to be omniscient in the sense that omniscience was understood by the later Buddhists is questionable. So is it the case that this came to be attributed later to the Buddha to enhance the greatness of the Buddha, to emphasize on the greatness of the Buddha in a period in which it became necessary to preserve the teaching of the Buddha in the midst of other divergent religious teachings. Much material related to the biography of the Buddha are scattered in several suttas of the first 4 collections of the Sutta Pitaka and the Mahavagga of the Vinaya Pitaka. However, we do not find a systematic biographical account as in the Jataka commentary of the Theravada tradition. There are only scattered references to biographical events. So whatever biographical material found in the first 4 collections is related to events of the life in which he attained enlightenment. And this is so even with regard to the Vinaya. The Vinaya Pitaka begins the biography of the Buddha from the time he attained enlightenment. His whatever events related to his career are given from the time he attained enlightenment at the Bodhi tree. So as I said, the term Bodhisattva is used mostly with reference to biographical events in his life as Siddhartha Gautama, before the attainment of enlightenment, and the accounts are found to be brief and less detailed in presenting supernatural elements. Very little presentation of supernatural elements. In a few suttas, like Acharya Abhuta Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, this is something that we notice in the Majjhima Nikaya. Acharya Abhuta Sutta, wonders and marvels. Acharya means wonderful. Abhuta means marvelous. So it talks about the wonderful and marvelous events connected with the Buddha's birth. There are references here to his descent from the Tusita world, as well as miraculous phenomena associated with his birth. So this is one place in the suttas where you find some marvelous and miraculous events admitted. The reason for the existence of much less material of that sort, which draw attention to the mysterious aspect of the Buddha, in this body of literature, may be that in this stratum, the main focus was on the message relating to the practical path of attaining immediate liberation. the main emphasis was on the novel vision of the Buddha, the new concept of liberation from suffering in this very life, and the practical way to be followed in order to attain it. Now, we can actually look into a few details relating to the marvelous and the wonderful in the early parts of the canon, like the Vinaya Pitaka and some suttas. The Mahavagga, for instance, Mahavagga of the Vinaya Pitaka, yeah, it begins with a reference to the Buddha staying at the foot of the tree of enlightenment for 1 week in a single posture. This was at the bank of the river Neranjara. He is said to have contemplated on his most significant enlightenment experience, Paticca Samuppada, at this time. Then, according to this biographical account in the Vinaya Pitaka, he moves from the tree of enlightenment to the Ajapala Nigrodha tree and stays in a single posture for 1 more week, according to this account, biographical account. And both occasions highlight the notable characteristics of the Buddha's attainment. So he is described as a person who has abandoned all evil states. Bahita Papa Dhammo. This is how he is described there. Bahita Papa Dhammo. One who has abandoned all evil states. Papa Dhammo. Papa Dhammo. Having the nature of one who has abandoned all evil states. Then Nikayas. Nikayas means no dirt, no stains, yeah, or no taints, Nikayas. So these were all ethical descriptions about the Buddha's attainment, having an ethical significance, moral significance. Nikayas. Then Yatatto. Yatatto means he is of restrained self. He is a person with self-restraint. Yatatto. Then he is described as Vedanta Gu. Vedanta Gu. because this is in relation to the idea of the Vedas in the ancient Indian tradition. So the Buddha maintains that he has found a new Veda, not the old Veda, which is traditionally handed down, but the three Vedas consisting of the new knowledge that he has discovered, like ability to remember the past, then the knowledge of the destruction of taints, the knowledge pertaining to the re-becoming of other living beings. They pass away and re-become. So these are the three most important kinds of knowledge that the Buddha emphasizes. Tevijja. Because that term Tevijja was coined to challenge the three vidya of the Vedas. Yeah, Tevijja Brahmana. Yeah, they were referred to as having Tevijjas. So the Buddha replaced those Tevijja, which is represented in the texts, the three Vedas, with these three types of knowledge. So Vedanta Guru gone to the end of the Vedas. Vedanta Guru means that gone to the end of the Vedas. He has gone to the end of knowledge, reached the climax of knowledge. That is what it means, Vedanta Guru. Then Vusita Brahmacharya. Now, Brahmacharya was also a term from the earlier tradition. The Buddha used the same term, Brahmacharya. But Brahma does not involve any theistic idea in the Buddha system. Brahma means the highest, higher fare, the higher practice. That is Brahmacharya, higher living. That is what Brahma indicated. So he described himself as Bhusita Brahmacharya. Bhusita means who has fulfilled. Fulfilled the requirements of the higher life. Who is accomplished in the higher life. Accomplished in the higher life. And the emphasis is on the happiness that results from the absence of maliciousness, the cultivation of compassion, the removal of all passion, the removal of the pride and the conceit that I am, that is completely eliminating the thought egocentric attachment. And in this context, it's described as Asmi Manasa Vinaya. Asmi Manasa Vinayo. Asmi Mana means the conceit that I am. He has completely removed it. Yeah, Asmimana Savine. Then there is reference to his living for another 7 weeks under the Rajayatana Mula. Rajayatana Mula. Rajayatana Mula is the foot of the Rajayatana tree. Yeah. Then there is reference to the merchants Tapus and Bhalluka. These two merchants coming across the Buddha. And there are some supernatural event is introduced. These two merchants are encouraged by a deity, a divine being, to see and make an offering to the Buddha. They were just passing by, these merchants, and they were encouraged by a devata or a deity to offer something to the Buddha, because he has been without a meal for several weeks now. He hasn't had any meal for several weeks. So the Buddha receives rice cake and honeycomb. Then the idea of guardian deities are introduced here. Guardian deities. Yeah. They miraculously offer bowls to the Buddha to receive the food. Bowls, precious bowls. Then he accepts the meal in one of those bowls. Then after that week, he goes back to the Ajapala Nigrodha tree. The Ajapala Nigrodha tree. And there, the Buddha reflects on what he realized. And he thinks that it was realized with great difficulty. Which means I realized it with great difficulty. And I cannot express this to others, because other persons who are overwhelmed, who are overwhelmed or controlled by greed and hatred, it is not easy for them to understand this. Even if I were to teach, it won't be easy for them to understand this. This is a way of living which goes against the current. It runs against the flow of things. Patisotagam, going against the stream. Patisotagam. Patisotagam. Against the stream. And it's very subtle. The Buddha says it's very subtle and profound. Profound, deep. Subtle and deep. And those who are attached to passion will not be able to see this because they are covered by the veil of darkness. Tamo Khanda, the great mass of darkness. They are covered. Then at this point, something supernatural is introduced because Brahma Sampati intervenes. Brahma Sampati comes and invites the Buddha to teach. So he invites the Buddha to open up the gates of immortality for the benefit of the rest of mankind. So probably in the context of the Brahmanical belief, it may have been necessary for the Buddhist tradition to bring in this kind of mythological element into it to convince the people that the Buddha is someone who is honored even by Brahma. So Brahma himself comes and pleads with the Buddha to teach. So it is important for everyone to listen to the Buddha's message because it is something that even the Brahma considers important. So such descriptions can be understood as attempts to introduce mythology in order to cater to the needs of the society at that time, which was obsessed with the Brahmanical belief system. Then at this point, the Buddha decides to teach the Dhamma and go to Isipatana deer park to see the Panchavagya monks. Then he meets Upaka, the Ajivaka. Upaka, the Ajivaka, on his way. And in this context, the magnanimity of the Buddha is expressed. Now, these are instances in which the early canonical sources present the nature of the Buddha. The Buddha himself talking about his nature. So he says, Sabba Vibhu. Sabba Vibhu means I have transcended or gone beyond everyone. Sabba Vibhu. I have gone beyond everyone, or I have conquered everything. Sabba Vibhu. Sabba Vidu. There you find the term Sabba Vidu. I have seen everything. I have seen everything. Sabbesu Dhammesu Anupalito. That means I am not attached to anything whatsoever. Anupalita means not tainted by. I am not tainted by anything whatsoever. Not defiled by anything whatsoever. All dirt is removed. Sabbanjaho. Sabbanjaho, I have abandoned everything. Even the notion of the self. Sabbanjaho. Tanha khaye vimutto, I am released at the termination or the eradication of craving. I am released through the eradication of craving. Now, Upaka asks Buddha who his teacher is. The Buddha looks very peculiar, very impressive. So Upaka wants to know whose teaching he follows, what his teaching is. And it is in response to this that the Buddha says this, according to the Mahavagga. He says, Sayang Abhinyaya. Sayang Abhinyaya. I have obtained higher knowledge by myself. Sayang, by myself. So I need not follow any other teacher. Who should I follow if I have discovered it myself? So he claims to be the discoverer of the new path. And he says, Name Acharyo Atti. For me, there is no teacher. That is, for what he discovered, there is no teacher. Name Acharyo Atti. Sadiso mena vijjati. That means there is no one who is equal to me. Like peerless. I am peerless. There's none who is comparable to me. Sadiso mena vijjati. Sadeva kasming lokasming natti me patipuggalo. In the world, inclusive of gods, there is no one who is going to rival me. Patipuggalo. No one to rival me, to compete with me. Ahanghi araha loke. He says, in the world I am an arahat. I am an arahant. So this is one instance in which the Buddha himself claims to be an arahant. Aham sattha anuttaro. I am the incomparable teacher. Ekom hi samma sambuddho. I am the soul, the only fully enlightened one. I am the only fully enlightened one. Siti bhutosmini bhuto. I have achieved cooling myself. Yeah, cooling myself. Siti bhuto. I have cooled myself, not suffering from heat, the pain of heat. Siti bhutosmi nibbhuto. I am calmed, tranquil. And I'm going to the city of Kasi to roll on the wheel of Dhamma. I'm going to the city of Kasi to roll on the wheel of Dhamma. Dhamma chakkang pavattetung gacchami kasinang purang. So he says, I will be beating the drum of Dhamma, the drum of immortality, the drum of immortality for the benefit of the world which is suffering from intellectual blindness. So he claims to be an arahat and one who has conquered everything. Ananta Jino. Ananta Jino. He calls himself a Jina, a conqueror, one who has won the battle. And then he doesn't want to distinguish himself completely from others. He says, Madisave Jina Honti Ye Patta Asavakyam. Whoever attained the destruction of cankers are victorious ones like myself. They are also victorious ones. So the Buddha did not reserve the title Jina to himself. He says if someone can attain the destruction of taints, such a person is a victorious one. Yeah. So he used the language that was known at the time to refer to a supremely enlightened person. And he says, I am a victorious one because I have won victory over evil states of mind. I have been able to conquer the evil states of mind. So here the emphasis of the Buddha is on the conquest of the evil states of mind. Then when he goes to the Panchavagya monks, the group of 5, his former associates, they were cautioned not to address him as an equal. So this does not reflect any super a kind of transcendental quality of the Buddha. That was the way the Indians, it was the Indian tradition. If someone is a teacher, the teacher is not addressed by name. So the Buddha claims to be a teacher who has something important to teach. So he must be shown the respect that is normally shown to the teacher. So that is not a claim to some kind of divine status, but it is a claim for some significant knowledge that he has to transmit to others who are prepared to listen. Then he says he has discovered something. He has gained vision. Chakkungudapadi. The vision arose to me regarding things that have been not known before, not heard before in earlier traditional teachings. Yeah, Pubbe Ananusute Su Dhammesu. Pubbe Ananusute Su Dhammesu. Chakkungudapadi. The vision arose to me regarding matters that were not found in the earlier revealed traditions. And it is then that I came to recognize myself as a fully enlightened one. I made the claim to be fully awakened because of this reason. Because I have discovered something that was not known to the previous traditions.